So today we're going to talk about human population growth. The first figure I want to take a look at showcases the human population growth or figures the human population growth from 10,000 years before present to roughly present day. And what I want to point out is that the vast majority of the growth, the human population growth, has happened in the last 200 years. At about 1800, there was something that happened in the human population or the human history that caused us to start growing exponentially. And if you remember when we talked about exponential growth, that's that growth that we see here with this steep incline. And so I want you to think about what happened in 1800 that started that growth. So started that surge in human population growth. And the other thing I'll point out, this figure, it looks like we're leveling off here at 7 billion. Currently at at this point we are at 7 billion worldwide. But we'll talk about how it's not expected that we're leveling off at the current moment. So we'll talk about that here shortly when we look at projected human population growth models in a moment. So the next thing I want to take a look at is this map that shows population growth in different regions of the world and their population growth rate, And in general, the global population growth rate peaked at 2.1% in 1960. So 2.1% in 1960. Since then, it's dropped to 1.2%. So think about that. So 1960, 2.1% population growth. Today, 1.2%. Okay, so what I want you to think about is, despite the fact that we've reduced the population growth rate, we're still growing. Okay, so think about exponential growth. When you have exponential growth, you have an exponential growth of a small number, it's going to be a small amount of growth. But if you have an exponential growth of a large number, it's going to reproduce very quickly. So we can use the rule of 70 to estimate the doubling rate, and that can help us to understand how fast we might expect a population to double. So the rule of 70 works like this. You take 70 and you divide it by your growth rate, and whatever your outcome is, that is the number of years it would take to roughly double your population. So at a growth rate of 1.2%, we can expect that our population would double in 58 years. So think about that. We've got 7 billion people in the world now. We have a growth rate of 1.2%. We're still going to double. We're still going to grow, even though we have a smaller growth rate than we did in 1960. We see here in this white region, so the white on Europe and Russia and these other areas, that indicates that they have less than 0% population growth. So they're essentially not growing, and they're actually going in the opposite direction. So this includes Greece and Poland and a lot of Portugal, a lot of those European nations. We're slightly behind them with that. We have 0 to 0.75% growth rate. But what the general trend that I want you to notice is these industrialized nations, they have slowed their population growth, while the tropics and subtropics are having very high population growth rates. And in general, we can also think about their economies. They are generally not industrialized nations. They're not well developed. They are the developing countries. So the developing countries in the tropics and the subtropics are showing to have very high population growth rates. So if we were to say, so here are these countries in Africa where they have more than 3% growth rate. If we were to take 70 and divide it by 3, that would help us to understand how fast we might expect their population to grow. And this shows the cause and consequences of human population. And really what I want to point out is that the human population has diverse consequences and causes, and all of these consequences are going to be bad for both the environment and society. Ultimately, we're going to be linked, and I want you to notice that all of the things that we talk about in class as far as environmental problems, they can essentially be linked back to human population growth. All right, so I want to talk about Thomas Malthus and Paul Ehrlich. So Thomas Malthus was a demographer, and Paul Ehrlich is an economist, but both of them have argued that runaway populations would surpass the food supply and lead to disaster. And essentially they say that unless the population can be controlled by laws or social structures, that the number of people will surpass the amount of food available, and then from there we would predict that famine and conflict, war, disease, starvation, all of those things would start to control the population. So the human population has quadrupled in the last 100 years, which is faster than it's ever happened before. Now, Ehrlich's prediction, which he talked about in his book called The Population Bomb, hasn't happened yet, but we have seen that we have increased famine, increased disease, and we do have conflict. So those parts of his prediction have happened, but not to the degree to which either one of them believed that it would. Okay, so I wanted to talk about the UN's predictions for world population. So at constant fertility rates, which we stand at right here, this is what we can expect to happen in the future. So we're estimated to reach 11 million by 2050. So here we have 11 million by 2050 if the current fertility rates stay the same. Now, the UN predicts that that's not going to happen. They predict that we're going to level out in this medium range where we're going to level out in this medium range, and our best guess is that by 2050 we'll reach 9.3 billion. Now, if women have 0.5 children more than the medium scenario, then we're expected to reach 10.6 billion by 2050. And in the low scenario, if we have women having 0.5 fewer babies, then we're expected to reach 8.1 billion by 2050. And I think we can all agree that the 8.1 billion would probably be the best bet. And we can see that in the 8.1 billion, that gradually it starts to go down. And that could be our best bet. So we'll talk about some of the things that we can do to make this happen. All right, so another important thing I want to discuss with you are these age structure diagrams, and they're also called population pyramids. And what these essentially do is they show the number of individuals in a different age class in a population. In the population pyramids, you see that these horizontal bars, these represent the number of people in an age class. And what you can use these for is to predict what that population will do and how it will grow. So if you see the population pyramid that has a very large base, you can expect that population to grow rapidly, because as these people that are at the bottom end of the population pyramid, as they grow and mature, eventually, very soon actually, these young children will become reproductive adults, and when they do, they will start having more children and they'll make a larger base. It's like it'll have a population boom. Whereas you can have a very stable population if you notice that the bars are roughly the same width. And then you can have a decreasing population if the bars, the pre-reproductive age children or the pre-reproductive members of the population are less than the reproductive age population, because as these people grow up, they're not going to end up replacing all of the ones that they're further up the chain. So what we do see again, this goes back to the different regions of the world. So Nigeria does have a very broad population pyramid base, whereas Canada has less in the base and more in the reproductive age. And you'll notice as it tapers off, we would expect that as you get to the top of the pyramid, you have less and less because people start to die off as they reach those older ages. So this figure shows the annual growth rate of the global human population. And what we see is that global human population generally peaked in the 1960s. So we look at the world, which is this blue line. So it sees that it peaked here in the 1960s, and since then it has gradually declined. So, and then if we look at our the less developed countries, those have been declining since our less developed countries have their human population growths have been dropping since the 1960s, and the least developed countries began falling in the 1990s. And so generally, and then we see also here in the most developed regions, we started dropping a little bit earlier before them. And so the thing that I want to point out, though, is that despite the fact that these population growth rates are declining, we're still going to have population growth at about the same amount per year. And the reason being is that because if you have a smaller percentage increase of an even larger number, you're going to have roughly the same number of people added. So even though the growth rate is smaller, we have such a large population growing to begin with, we have a large number of people that are reproducing, it's still going to be growing. So keep that in mind. The population growth rate is down, but population growth can still occur and actually grows quite quickly. All right.